You're now live, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to the October meeting of the Wye Valley Trust Board. We are delighted today to be welcoming our new company secretary, Gwenny Scott. So a warm welcome, Gwenny. We'll be filling the not inconsiderable boots that Erica Herman has trod with us for the last few years, and we'll say more about Erica at the end of the meeting. We have apologies from a few people today. As per our usual board cycle, Russell Hardy, our chair, and Glenn Burley, chief executive, aren't with us. So I'm Frances Martin, deputy chair, and I'm the pleasure to chair today, ably assisted by our managing director, Jane Ives, and other colleagues. We also note apologies today from Chizo Agwu, our medical director, chief medical officer, and from Katie Osmond, our Chief Finance Officer. I don't think we have any other apologies, and a thank you to Susie Joburns, who is deputising for Katie today. So welcome, Susie. Has anybody got any new declarations of interest or declarations particularly pertinent to items on today's agenda? No, I will take the absence of digital hands as nothing to declare. So we will move on then to the minutes of the meeting of the 5th of September. Is everybody happy that those are a true and accurate record of the meeting that we held on the 5th of September? I can't see any questions or comments, so thank you very much, Val, for those. We will note those as accurate and sign accordingly. There was just one item for update and action, and Alan, I understand you followed up on the question that we'd had from a member of the public in relation to concerns around people who might not treat our staff in the way that we would expect. Is there anything that you'd like to add to the update that you've helpfully put into the action log?
Or at least to say that I met the member of the public and we discussed his concerns in detail, and there were a couple of actions on the back of that I'm taking forward.
Thank you very much. And we do, as we have said before, take very seriously the safety and well-being of all of our staff, and are grateful that the vast majority of our public, even when they are frustrated sometimes about some of the waits that they have for care, treat our staff with dignity and respect, and expect our staff to do the same with every member of the public and all of our patients. Thank you, Alan. So moving on to the substantive items for today's agenda, we'll start please with the Managing Director's report. So over to you, Jane, what would you like to pull out?
Thank you. So since the last time we met, we've had quite a significant report land on all of our desks, which is the Darzi independent investigation into the NHS in England, what's being termed as the diagnosis phase of what the government wants to do next with the NHS. I've put a bit of a summary in there. I won't go through it all, but if I were to summarise it further, I would say that there's three causes, first of all, why we are where we are. One is austerity and the impact on the NHS and social care itself, but also the impact on the wider determinants of health. I mean, it's quite a shocking statistic that the healthy life expectancy of women has gone down 1.3 years since 2010 to where we are now, and about a half a year drop for men. So they're now almost equivalent, and that's for healthy life expectancy. Say it's now at 62.7 years for women. So that's one. Then related to that, that meant that the pandemic hit the NHS much harder than lots of other parts of the world, and it's taking us much longer to recover from that, with long waiting lists and so forth. And then the third is the structural reforms that came in 2012, which have now been unpicked, but really meant that austerity combined with that huge structural reform meant the NHS was less effective at planning and improvement, and all of that had a huge productivity impact. So that's really the diagnosis, and I think it is a really welcome report. What's most welcome, of course, is it's saying, you know, there is nothing in here that suggests our funding and actual basic operational model there's anything wrong with it at all. The treatment then on the next stage is to develop a 10-year plan for the NHS, which will happen over the next few months to be published in the spring. And there are 3 big shifts in there that the government are saying they want to see, from treatment to prevention, from hospital to community, and from analogue to digital. Now, I don't think those would surprise anybody. In a way, they're actually our current plan. The difficulty is we haven't really delivered those things. Instead of shifting funding from treatment into prevention and from hospital into community, actually the opposite has happened, because the hospital sector is picking up too much of the work. So the challenge then, I think, isn't necessarily the plan and what we're trying to achieve. The challenge is actually making it deliver and having a plan that is going to deliver those things. So I think that's the challenge, and as I'm sure we will all input into that plan and the consultation that's going to happen over the next, let's say, the next 6 months or so. So all of that is really encouraging for the future, I think, but we're still facing this winter, and there really isn't anything new for this winter. We talked this morning at some length around our plan for this winter, and that will come to the public board session next time in summary form. And there's a huge amount that's being done. I called it this morning about we are throwing the kitchen sink at trying to make sure we have safe urgent care pathways over the course of the winter. There's a lot of new services and expanded things coming in over the course of the next few months. And of course, we've got 2 business cases on the agenda today, which are also related with that increasing resilience of our urgent care pathways. So that's probably as much as I want to say about urgent care here. I think Andy will cover more of that detail in his section. And then lastly, in terms of financial recovery, we are in financial recovery under a financial recovery board. And again, at the workshop this morning, we looked at where we are with elective productivity. A lot of very encouraging results that are coming out of our first month, September, where we've had all of our theatres available to us, and the new elective surgical hub, or daycare surgical unit as it's now named. So some really positive productivity improvements that we've seen this morning, which does give us an opportunity for to earn more income over the second half of the year. Last thing in my report is just from our great teams, and again, the integrated care division is really talking about all of those services that they're putting into the community around improving our winter resilience. So happy to take any questions, Frances.
Thank you very much, Jane. Any questions or comments for Jane? No, as Jane said, we had a very useful board workshop this morning, and many of those themes were picked up, and further items on the agenda where we will explore in more details whether we have made sufficient provision within our planning for this winter in anticipation of a broader plan once the Darcy investigation work has been put into a what we're going to do about it plan, which obviously is going to be led nationally. Okay, thank you. So let's move on then to the integrated performance report. An awful lot in it. Colleagues have had a chance to read the report. So what would you like to pull out, starting with Jane?
Just a couple of things to kick us off. So I want to start off with a really big thank you. So over the course of the summer, doing all of that life cycle work in theatres and really importantly in ED has meant that we've had a lot of our services operating out of environments they're not usually in, which has been really very difficult for the staff. So a massive thank you to everybody who's been involved in doing that. Our ED is now back in ED and in both an improved environment and a one that's been made up to date from the life cycle work as well. So that was just a really big thank you for that. I just want to talk a little bit about, so we are undertaking a review at this halfway point in the year of what we do think we can deliver in the second half of the year in terms of our elective work, which obviously most importantly, it's about reducing the length of time people wait for their care is the most important reason for doing whatever we can. And secondly, as I just said, it improves our financial position. So that H2 plan, half of the year, second half of the year plan will be available in the next few days, so we can see what we think that's going to deliver for us. But it does feel like it's going quite well. And then the last thing I just wanted to draw attention to was around staff engagement, because we only deliver all of these things with all of our staff. And Geoffrey and his team have run a huge amount of staff engagement sessions over the summer, and we've got some really rich feedback from that. And on top of that, the new annual staff survey has just been, the national one has just been published. So we're encouraging all of our staff to fill that in. It's gone to everybody, either in electronic form or on paper, depending on where they work and what's more easily accessible to them. So we're encouraging everybody to really fill out that survey, because it really does impact on us. There are things that we do things about when we hear from staff what's most important to them. So that's a big encouragement for all of our staff to fill it in, and we'll be feeding back to the divisions every couple of weeks, so letting them know how many of their staff have filled in the survey, so they can encourage staff further a bit closer to the ground. Okay.
Thanks, Jane. Any questions or comments for Jane on her introduction? A couple of points for me, just to echo on behalf of the whole board your thanks to everybody. There used to be a time when the summer saw a reduction in activity and was a very good time to be doing lifestyle maintenance. We know that that isn't the case now, and the extraordinary efforts that teams across the organisation have gone to enable the decant of the emergency department and other work across the trust over this summer to ensure that the facilities that we have got remain fit for purpose. So a huge thanks for that. And yeah, just to re-echo, delighted that we are doing so much engagement with staff. That is, as you say, the only way we can deliver the care that we want to our families and friends and all the people of Herefordshire and Mid Wales. And yes, no competition is a bad competition. So teams, let's see who's going to get the highest take up of responses. And just as a reminder for staff, it is anonymous. Don't be perturbed if you get a chasing email saying you haven't done it. That doesn't mean that they're ticking everybody. So they can't see individual responses. We'd like everybody. It is the most important metric. Glenn Burley, our chief executive, says the staff survey is the thing that he takes most notice of in terms of an assessment of whether our services are fit for purpose, and that whether we as a board are doing everything we can to provide the very best care that we can and safe services. So I encourage everybody to participate in that. Okay, let's move on then. So Lucy, over to you for quality, please.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm covering the whole of the report today, given Chizo Agwu's apologies. So 3 main things from me today. Firstly, I just want to focus on Safety in Sync, which is our Herefordshire place-based opportunity for partners across health, social care and the voluntary sector to come together to discuss safety concerns and make improvements where necessary. Safety in Sync was shortlisted for the Health Service Journal Awards, which took place in Manchester last month. And although we didn't win on the night, I am really proud of the teams that have made Safety in Sync the success that it is. And I know that next year we will go from strength to strength. Just want to touch a little, if I may, on paediatric audiology services. So board several months ago received an update on the back of the Midlothian review and findings. We have been participating in the Midlands region peer review and response to that Midlothian review. So Quality Committee received an update last week in relation to the action plan associated with the review process. There's only one element outstanding from the review process, and that's the clinical audit undertaken by the external subject matter expert into those children and young people that are on the non-discharge pathway for a testing called ABR testing. We expect to get those audit results at the end of October, and assuming that there's nothing of concern within those clinical audit results, we have every hope that what will happen is that the ICB will shut down the incident response process, and the ongoing monitoring and oversight of those services will be handed back to us as business as usual. During July, NHS England wrote to all trusts who provide audiology services, suggesting that trusts should work towards IQIPS accreditation, and that we needed to respond with our plan for that by the 4th of October. We have responded this week following discussions at Quality Committee to say that currently, due to the fragility of our service, particularly in relation to the workforce, we can't go for IQIPS accreditation right now, but our next steps will be to undertake a gap analysis against the accreditation standards, determine the resource required to deliver and implement the accreditation process, and to determine the timescale for delivery. So we submitted our response to NHS England, as I say, earlier this week. And although I don't normally cover mortality, I did just want to talk to board about that spike we've seen in our perinatal mortality rates. We've gone from 2.39%, which is well within the expectation of where we need to be, and it's spiked at 4.26 per 1,000 births. We do know that very small numbers, given our overall births as a trust, can make quite a large spike, and that's what we've seen during the last couple of months. It relates to 4 stillbirths, and all of those cases have been reviewed. And our areas of focus are around access and referrals onto the preterm pathway, and also the ongoing monitoring when individuals are on that pathway. And then more recently, the team presented at our new Learning from Deaths panel, and we know that the team also need to focus on sepsis in relation to that. Finally, I'll take the rest of the report as read. What we've included this month is just the incidents that relate to our patient safety priorities, the number of incidents that have occurred since April to date, and just some highlights around the quality improvement work that's going on in relation to those priorities. And then the final slide just details our staffing fill rates, and just to report no safety concerns this month, and significant improvements in terms of reduced agency spend and very, very limited use of off-framework agency. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Lucy. Any questions or comments for Lucy? Nicola.
A question and an observation. So with the Ombudsman cases, do we have any context to understand, is there a general national increase, or is this a spike from our trust? And are there any themes? And I don't necessarily mean in the reason for the complaints, but it might be in terms of how many days they were overdue or how long it's taken to deal with it.
So there is benchmarking available, so we can certainly do that most definitely across the group, Nicola, if not more broadly. Happy to look at that and let colleagues know. We do wonder if the spike we've seen is due to, so we do know that the Ombudsman experienced a significant backlog of cases during COVID, and that they're just starting to get on top of that backlog. So we do wonder if some of the cases relate to just a backlog issue rather than a particular spike. No themes, and what is reassuring is actually that many of the cases are sort of closed down with no further requirements for us to address matters. And obviously we've addressed those matters where the Ombudsman have made a recommendation.
Thanks, Lucy. And my other observation, it was an observation really, looking at the mortality, in that I can remember for some time now, there's always been that early signs for stroke, things to look for and things to do when you see those signs. And there's just so many more stories about sepsis nowadays. The numbers are obviously going up. Now, that could be just because there's more awareness and it's a word that's used more generally. But I just wonder if there's almost a need for the same sort of initial observations, what to do if you're just the general public when you think it might be sepsis, that we used to and have been doing with stroke. So not one thing for you to answer it. I think it's just a general public awareness sort of education question.
Yeah, helpful, Nicola. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Lucy? No, thank you. For reassurance for our staff and members of the public, we have detailed discussion on all of the things that Lucy has picked out some summaries from in our quality committee chaired by Ian James, where we spend several hours scrutinising in detail, and that enables us to be more rigorous in the questioning and the analysis that we undertake, and therefore it's a shortened summary that we hear, but reassurance for the public that we do that in the board subcommittee, and the minutes from those meetings are always later on in the agenda at the public board for information. Thank you. Let's move on then. Andy, what would you like to tell us particularly about our responsiveness and activity?
Thank you, Chair. Jane's already covered the extensive work we've had over our ED and theatres over the summer period. It's great that that work is now concluded and we've got additional assessment space which supports some of our valuing patients' time and winter plans ahead of the winter in terms of supporting our ability to stream and navigate patients away from ED, but also that vital assessment space increase that we have in our ED department. That's despite over the period really high levels of ED attendances, with months in the summer higher than that over the winter, and that continues to be the case as we talk today, with really high levels of ED attendances. However, despite that, our winter plans, as board heard this morning, continue to progress, and we're particularly excited that some of the schemes are now kicking off, particularly some of our frailty bridging team in that support and getting patients out of hospital rather than admitted from our frailty same-day emergency care back home, where they can receive care at home whilst packages of care wait to be kicked in, and the implementation of a relaunch of our community referral hub next week, along with a enhanced combined offering with single point of access that we can offer the Herefordshire system. But despite that, we still have a number of temporary escalation spaces open, congestion in our ED, and issues with ambulance handovers. And as you know, the board heard this morning the number of plans that we've got in place and progressing over the next few months to ensure we're in the best possible position ahead of the winter period. Highlighted in my report some of the concerns around cancer that we had, particularly in July, in our 62-day performance. Despite the fact that our 28-day faster diagnosis standard continues to be performed well and at or above the national standard, we had some real issues in terms of radiology pathology and an increase in pathway delays across a number of key specialties over July, with some significant workforce challenges. That's been rectified in August, and August, I can assure the board, we're back above the required standard for 62 days, and early indications are that we've also performed well for September. So we are back on track, but still remains a concern in terms of ongoing monitoring, which myself and the cancer manager undertake with the various specialties. In terms of our elective pathways, the board heard this morning a presentation from our theatre team on some of the activity improvements that have happened since the opening of our day surgery day case unit, or previously known as the elective hub, and how we've delivered our activity plans for the first half of the year, and meeting our trajectory, and also meeting and exceeding the value weighted activity of our activity that measures not just activity numbers but complexity, exceeding the 1920 trajectories. Just two other things from me. Diagnostics, our diagnostics performance continues to improve. We continue to deliver high levels of activity above our planning assumption for 24-25. The number of patients waiting over 13 weeks for a diagnostic has reduced from 500 to 200 this month, and we're on course to eradicate those patients over the next 2 months. And with the number of patients waiting less than 6 weeks for a diagnostics has improved from 70% to 80% over the last 6 weeks. And also our 65-week wait patients in our elective pathways, we set a trajectory for 50 patients, no more than 50 patients for the end of September. We succeeded in only 44 patients waiting over 65 weeks for treatment at the end of September, and we continue to work towards ensuring we have no patients waiting over 65 weeks by the end of December. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Andy. An enormous amount of work going on, so thanks again to all of the teams for their hard work. Any questions or comments on that for Andy? No, as he said, we spent a long time this morning looking at what we've done so far and how much more ambitious we can be to continue to erode the backlog of work that we've accumulated over the last few years. So very grateful for all of the hard work with that. Jeffrey, what would you like to report?
Thanks, Francis. In terms of the people matters within the report, we've seen a reduction in sickness absence, and we've taken active steps to support our employees by offering flu jabs, health checks, and tailored mental health support as part of our Health and Wellbeing Week, which kicks off next week. So we'll be promoting the uptake of the vaccinations, because we know it's important for our staff to be vaccinated. Active work continues with our divisional leaders in terms of trying to fill our clinical vacancies, and we are putting in place a comprehensive recruitment and retention plan to address the growing turnover of our healthcare support workers. If you look at the report, you would note that we've seen an increase in turnover for that staff group. So we're going to be putting a comprehensive plan in place to address that, working with divisional leads. We are promoting Black History Month and Freedom to Speak Up Month in October to show our support to our BME colleagues, and also to promote and encourage good relations across the trust. So it's important for us to do that, and we are promoting that throughout October. Jane mentioned the staff survey, which has now gone live, and we are encouraging every single employee to complete the survey, because their voice makes a difference in terms of enhancing the working environment and also the care that we offer to our patients. And finally, we will be running the first ever University Open Day event at the County Hospital site on the 25th of October, working with the University of Worcester. So we will use that open day to showcase and promote training and career development opportunities for our staff and also for members of the public. Those are the key points I wanted to highlight, Francis. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. Grace.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report, Jeffrey. Just wondering, in your summary, you talk about sickness absence is going down, which is fantastic to hear, and mental health is still one of the main causes. Do we have any detail about what's under that, about what is most prevalent within the umbrella of mental health? Just thinking about how we can, A, tailor the support more, and B, if there's any implications for us as an employer for wider wellbeing.
That's a good question, Grace. Yes, we do have that. So we have detailed reports from the mental health and wellbeing nurse, and it tends to be around stress, anxiety, depression, and a lot of them are outside stress, not necessarily work-related stress. So there's a lot of things to do with cost of living crisis and just the general environment. But we've got the detailed reports, and we can definitely have more discussions about that. But we maintain the details on that.
Thank you, Grace. Jane.
Yeah, I just think I'd add to that. That was one of the other highlights from the Darcy report. It's just, the increase in mental health issues, concerns, illness has, in the last 10 years, has absolutely rocketed. So it's something that just affects all of our staff as part of wider society, I think, as well. And often, Jeffrey, when we speak about that, as often as not, it's not work-related mental health issues. Actually, it's about broader issues.
Helpful, Jane. Yeah, but I think we all recognise, and particularly for board colleagues, our very real responsibility to look after the health and wellbeing and pastoral care for all of our staff, who are the people that do the direct patient care on our behalf. So thank you, Jeffrey.
Thanks.
Okay, let's move on. Jane mentioned in her introduction that our financial position is not where we want it to be and where it needs to be going forward, and so we have established a financial recovery board, and we are meeting as a board regularly to scrutinise the plans that we have for financial stewardship. So in that context, and as Katie is away, Susie, what would you like to pick out of the report for this afternoon?
Thank you, Chair. And you've stolen the second bullet point that I was going to mention, so I won't mention it again. As Jane and yourself have suggested, we are off plan year to date by 3.8 million. That's largely driven by underperformance in our savings programme. As you've already said, we've established a financial recovery board, and we're working really closely with the divisions on the identification and delivery of those savings plans. At the present time, we're continuing to forecast that we will achieve our plan, but you'll note in the report that we've said that we've got around 13 million of unmitigated risk at this point. We continue to look at that, and we'll be bringing full forecasts through Trust Board once those have been assessed and developed. The other thing to note, Chair, is that cash, given that we're a deficit organisation and that we're off plan, we're monitoring our cash position very, very closely.
Thank you, Susie, very much. Any questions or comments for Susie? Kieran.
Just a comment and then a question. Thank you, Chair. The comment is, I note in the summary, and you referred to it, is that there's 6 million of out-of-system risk. My understanding is that relates to the Welsh. The question I've got is, are the Welsh commissioners constructively engaged with the Trust about that money? Or is it, as you mentioned in the report, something that needs a lot more national support?
Thank you, Kieran. I think as we've probably discussed as a board, you're absolutely right. It is to do with Welsh commissioners and establishing a parity of funding, which is akin to what our English commissioners provide. There isn't a contractual mechanism. We have to engage with our Welsh commissioners about this, but we're continuing to work very closely with our ICB colleagues. And yes, we will need regional and national support to take that further with Welsh commissioners.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you for that, Kieran. Any other questions or comments for Susie? No. Okay, thank you. So we've got some meaty items to get through now, so I'm very aware of time. So Andy, we've all read the business case for the acute and emergency department clinical staffing, and I know that some of my non-executive colleagues have spent some time scrutinising the report. So what would you like to highlight, and what particularly are you asking of the board this afternoon?
Thank you, Francis. Yeah, I'll take the papers read. I just want to highlight a couple of things, and Erica's just going to share a couple of slides, hopefully.
They should be coming through.
Yeah,
I can see them.
Thank you, Erica. So yeah, this is a business case to expand the budgeted establishment of our ED medical teams. Next slide, please, Erica. This paper summarises the detailed proposal of an increased medical workforce for our emergency medical team. Underpinning this is, I can't reiterate enough, is the consistent senior decision making across our emergency and urgent care pathway, and making sure we have a fit for purpose medical workforce that underpins the increase we're seeing in type 1 attendances and matching our demanding capacity. The key drivers are there. Reduction in the case, it would help to, or will deliver a reduction in mortality, but also improve our clinical outcomes and of course patient experiences. Increase efficiency and productivity within the department, so mainly around time to be seen and time to refer, and easier access to services, ensuring that we can stream the right patient to the right pathway in the right time, and obviously that's across 7 days. One of the key aims of this case is to deliver a robust and effective workforce model that is able to meet the current financial challenges we have in our ED department, where they have a significant overspend in forecast run rates, which is significantly above their budgeted their current budget in order to deliver the current demands placed on the department. Next slide, please, Erica. In order to meet this, we've done some extensive demanding capacity reviews with the team and with support from the emergency care intensive support team, who not only visited the department but also helped work on our demanding capacity model to make sure our medical workforce absolutely matches our demanding capacity that's required in the department. We've also done other benchmarking work across the foundation group, particularly looking at George Eliot, who are a high performer in the emergency access standards. Also, as we know, we had a recent CQC visit in December 23, which highlighted the requirement for workforce matching demand and capacity, and to address the quality and safety within the department. So along with the various visits we've had and our own demanding capacity modelling in conjunction with ESIST, we've come up with this revised medical model. Next slide, please, Erica. So 3 options there is to go back to the original budgeted establishment. That would not meet the demanding capacity requirements, or what has been highlighted by the various external revisits and peer reviews. Undertake what we're currently doing with the current workforce model and carrying on with that high spend. That is not a place we want to go to. It doesn't meet the demanding, it doesn't meet the workforce requirement to ensure we've got senior decision makers and the workforce skill mix split that we want to undertake within the department. And then there is the do minimum, or the essential recommendation, and that is to increase our workforce by 10.3 full-time equivalents, which will allow us to have consultant presence across an expanded time period across 7 days of the week, increase our senior decision making within our senior residential doctors in the department, and reduce our junior medical workforce, and address some of the fragility within some of our workforce within ED, predominantly those staff that deliver our minor injuries and minor illnesses work stream, where that workforce is becoming increasingly fragile, and that addresses that also. The next couple of slides will have the financial assessment, which Susie will assist me in just going through.
Thanks, Andy. So as Andy said, this is the revised workforce model and the revised finances. Overall, we're increasing planning to increase the workforce by 10.3 whole-time equivalents. That's a mixture of increases around consultants and new specialty doctors, and a review through natural wastage of our clinical fellows and juniors, which would give us a revised recurrent budget of £6.2 million.
Thank you, Susie. Next slide, please, Erica.
Do you want me to carry on, Andy?
Yes,
so,
please.
as it says, this is a significant revenue investment and substantive recruitment, but it will significantly reduce the use of variable pay, and with that, the variable improvements in quality that Andy has been through. So the difference in the 2 budgets what we're proposing, we're currently forecasting to spend just over £6.7 million, and this will reduce our current budget down to £6.2 million, which is an overall saving of just over £500,000.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Erica. And then finally, Chair, just I'm asking the board to approve this case for implementation. The case does ensure that we can maintain patient flow and ensure that our ED is not congested, or goes to a way to improve the ED congestion and early assessment and treatment, allows us to screen patients more effectively internally and externally through navigation and streaming, mitigates that demanding capacity gap that we currently have against the current budgeted establishment and increases our 7-day working, along with changing our workforce, changing our workforce not only to improve senior decision making across 7 days, but increase the supervision for our junior workforce and the workforce in our urgent care pathway in ED overall.
Thank you very much, Andy and Susie, for that very helpful summary. Anybody got any questions or comments, particularly non-executive colleagues who kindly undertook a review last week of this final paper? Nicola.
I don't mind picking that up. We didn't just kick the tires on this once, we kicked it on twice to make sure that we'd really got to the detail and could really understand, because this is quite a commitment, and I think that there are risks involved that need close management, and we really want to make sure everything was in place to do that. I think that the business case does outline the questions we asked, but we did get them fully answered, so thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Kieran.
Thank you, Chair. To comment more than a question, or 2 comments. The first comment is, yes, I do fully support the business case. We've been through it pretty thoroughly with a review. But the second comment is, it's a significant investment, and I think it would be helpful if we have future business cases with significant investment that we at least have a commissioner comment in it. Appreciate they may not have the money in year to fund it, but having their commenting would help substantially and inform future contract negotiations.
Jane.
Yeah, thanks, Kieran. That's a good idea. Something that we are trying to look at for next year, and Glenn's certainly having discussions nationally, is about a reset of income for urgent care, because we're under a block arrangement. It hasn't grown as quickly as our urgent care demand is, so we do have to reset our urgent care income, because then if the money was following the patient, the income would follow them, but that hasn't been the case. So I think that national approach to the reset would be really helpful for us. The other point I was going to make about it is that this is an increase in our substantive senior staff, and I think that is really important, because the productivity of those senior staff is much higher than some of the junior staff that we have now, because those doctors are often in training and more junior. So I think that's a really important part of the case. And whilst we will be doing lots of things with our partners in primary care and our community services to reduce the demand on ED, there's no doubt it is going to keep growing, just because of the population that we serve and the aging population. So I'm very supportive of this, and that it is an investment in the future. When I first came here, I think we had 1.5 substantive consultants in ED. I think that's 5.2 now. So also our ability to recruit, as we've improved the environment and improved the working conditions in ED, I think is also hopeful that we'll be able to recruit.
Good, thank you, Jane. A couple of comments from me, and a couple of the things I was going to say have already been picked up, but just apropos the block funding for urgent emergency care, of course, we all know that a significant impact on our ability to break even as an organisation is the impact of rurality. So having a medium-sized district general hospital a long way from anywhere else, it intrinsically has some costs that aren't covered by some of the contracts that are in place. So making sure that we're factoring this into that rurality cost over income analysis, and I'm sure Glenn and others will be doing that. And just making sure, and I know executive colleagues will do that, that all of the benefits that the case is espousing, we've got a way of tracking those. So things about retention, things about the number of people that we see, the quality impact, the ability to discharge people from ED and all of the rest of it. Those metrics have to work, as well as the change in moving from temporary to substantive staffing. So, but yes, absolutely support rapid assessment as early as possible in the patient journey, and echoing again all that we're doing to work with the public, but also colleagues in primary community services when the emergency department is not the right place, so that we can create the capacity for people who really need it and need the expertise that can only be provided in a secondary care hospital. Jane.
Right, I was going to make one more comment, which I was going to say, and then I forgot. Andy and I had a super visit yesterday afternoon to our colleagues in Hereford Medical Group, who have come in for some criticism in the local media in terms of their access to services. And so Andy and I spent the afternoon with them yesterday. They've got a different way of accessing their services put in place, and they've got some metrics that are showing that it has really improved for their patients to be able to access the HMG services. And obviously, they provide the primary care services to about 20–25% of the population. So I thought it was just important to say in public what a good job they're doing in improving access.
Thank you, Jane, and a very helpful commendation of the colleagues. There has been some discussion in the press recently about how well or not different systems are working together to solve problems. We've said it here before, but I think the strength of the relationships between the one Herefordshire partners, so Herefordshire Council, Hereford and Worcester Healthcare Trust, Herefordshire General Practice and ourselves, where we absolutely feel like a team, and we're all focused on providing the best care and the best use of resources that we can do collectively. So we are doing everything we can to explore how we use our resources most wisely. So although one thing that Jane said at the beginning in terms of the DASI, that we're continuing to spend more on acute services and less on community services, this case looks like counter to what we should be doing about that, but it's in the context of wanting to do all that we can to improve prevention, early intervention, and avoiding hospital admission where it is not in a patient's best interest. Does anybody not support the recommendation in the paper to recruit substantively to these posts as outlined? There are no digital hands, so I take that as assent and therefore approved, and we look forward to very positive news about our ability to recruit substantively into a very dedicated and hard-working workforce and the impact that that's going to make. So thank you very much, Andy and team. I know that this has been a long time coming. That's because, as Nicola said, the scrutiny rightly has been significant to make sure that we are spending our resources in the right way. So thank you all for your perseverance to get us to this point. Back with you, I think, Andy, in terms of a proposal for bed reconfiguration.
Thank you, Chair. Eric has just got a few slides to share again. I'll take the paper as read, just to pick up, just to pick up on the main points. Thank you, Erica. Next slide, please. As we already know, our elective surgical hub, now known as the Day Case Surgical Unit, opened at the beginning of July, and with that came an opportunity that our previous day surgery unit became vacant. The plan there was to utilise that area for a number of estates works over the summer period, but actually through planning, that area then became vacant, and we quickly had to decide what we were going to do with that area in the short term, particularly on the face of high ED attendances, the ability for us not to be able to reduce boarding patients, the number of medical outliers we had on surgical wards, and the number of escalation beds we had open. So this case is a retrospective. I'm hoping for approval here based on operational and clinical plans we had to make in the summer to utilise that space in a far more productive planned way, rather than an acute unplanned way, which would not have been best use for that area, both in terms of patient care and value for money. So some of the drivers for change, if you do the next slide, please, Erica. So as I already mentioned, high numbers of medical outliers on surgical wards and high numbers of boarders. Next slide, please, Erica. Next slide, please, Erica. We've already covered that. So I'll carry on. The reconfiguration meant that we could change some of our awards. So we moved our elective surgical patients, thank you, our elective surgical patients from Froome ward down to the previous day surgery unit, moved our trauma beds to a new ward, and moved our general medical ward to a revised larger ward. That gave a net increase of 8 additional medical beds and 4 additional surgical beds because of those changes. Next slide, please. Option 1 was to, or option 1 within the paper states that we continue with the current bed base, or option 2, return to its previous bed base, where that area will potentially could be opened as a escalation area in the winter in an unplanned way. That we would like to adopt option 1, where the current day surgery unit is classed as the new Primrose ward, where we will house our elective patients over the winter period. Now, we undertook this change on the 15th of July, and we're already starting to see some of the benefits of making that change in terms of some of our underlying performance indicators. So next slide, please, Erica. So over the first 10 to 12 weeks of making this change, we've seen a number of medical outliers that are on surgical wards reduced from a daily average of 9 to a daily average of 5.7. The length of stay of the medical patients that were on our previous Gilwyn ward has reduced from 10.5 days to 8.5 days. And also we've seen, because of some of these changes, the number of ward moves that our patients are experiencing also reduced. So we look at July to September last year compared to July to September this year, the number of patients with one or no ward moves has increased, and the number of patients with 2 or more moves has reduced. So having an impact on the movement of patients, just flagging there that we're more and more we're getting the right patient in the right ward. Next slide, please, Erica. Susie would just cover the financial benefits of moving or keeping with the current option.
So as Andy already said, if we'd have done this in an unplanned way with a mix of agency and bank, it would have cost us just over £544,000. If we do this substantively, it saves us around £40,000. Given their financial position, we'd prefer to do this in a planned way. I know we've said at the beginning of this that this is a temporary fix, and these will be recurrent posts, but given our turnover, given changes, given the improvements that this is making in the future, we believe we'd be able to accommodate these recurrent posts and these recurrent staff.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Erica. So in conclusion then, this option has been worked through with cross-divisional agreement at operational nursing and at medical level. Is the best option for this winter to use this area in a planned way for our elective patients. We know that the area that we're currently using is not possibly an environment that we would want to use ongoing, but for this winter it's the best use of this area. It increased our overall bed base for 8 for medicine and 4 for surgery, and it's an integral part of our winter plan. As we stated, early indications are that it's having a positive impact on patient flow, and we have reduced the number of escalation beds over the summer period and medical outliers because of these changes we have made. And as I stated there, it's a key deliverable as part of our winter plan. This will remain under continuous review as part of the piece of work to review our bed base on the acute site overall, which Alan Dawson and his team are leading on to ensure we have the right size for our elective beds going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy and Susie. Questions and comments from colleagues? Sharon.
Thanks, Chair. Just to say that when we were reviewing this case as the non-exec representative, it was actually nice to actually be able to demonstrate the benefits, because we were actually seeing them come through in actual numbers, as opposed to normally it's a sort of, we believe this is going to happen, but there's no real sort of support at that point. So it was really nice change to actually see the true benefit that we were going to get from this, and we'll continue to endure. But as Andy said, it's a fundamental part of the winter plan, and the planned accountability and responsibility lines should help improve patient experience and safety for all. So absolutely supportive.
Thanks, Sharon. So we call it a pilot. So we've been piloting it, which has given us the evidence base. Excellent. Any other questions or comments? No. It seems eminently sensible, as you say, that the risk of recruiting nursing staff substantively is next to zero, and we will always be able to accommodate people should we get to the luxurious position of not needing to have this area open all of the time, in which case Alan will be cheering that we will have a natural decant area built into our capacity plan for the next bit of planned preventative maintenance. Lucy.
It's pleasing to note that we've been able to successfully recruit into all of the registered nurse positions already. So they're at full recruitment, which is really great. We've just got a little bit further to go on the healthcare support worker recruitment for this area.
Excellent, really good to hear, and we know that we have a concern about healthcare support worker recruitment that we've already talked about earlier. So to encourage people to consider that, if you're a member of the public, come and join our fantastic team, and we hope that you will have many opportunities to work in a supportive learning environment and opportunities for future career progression if that is what you would like to do. Anybody not agree with the proposal to continue with the configuration as we have been piloting for the last couple of months and to make it substantive? There are no digital hands, so we'll take that as approved. Thank you very much, Andy, and to colleagues who have helped you pull this together. And again, thanks to non-executive director colleagues for the scrutiny in advance of board. That makes it a lot easier to approve here. Okay, let's move on. The next item is board and committee dates. Don't know whether this is Jane or Erica.
So
Okay.
I don't think it's sort of taken as read. The only changes, as we discussed this morning, for the January, in line with the rest of the group, we won't have a board meeting, but we will have a board workshop, and that's particularly around, we will be in operational planning mode by then, and we will be wanting to look at objectives for next year and just giving everybody an opportunity to look at that. I think we'll also be looking at the route to resourcing in terms of the new education centre. So I think we just need to swap that over and make it a board workshop rather than a board meeting.
Agree. Thank you very much, Jane. Agree with that. One comment from me. I've mentioned several times the scrutiny that happens in board subcommittees that enables this public-facing board to operate, we hope, effectively and with some pace. In order for the board subcommittees to be able to fulfil that purpose, it is very important that colleagues are in attendance at those committees to present their papers and to enable particularly non-executive directors who aren't obviously as close to all of the detail on a day-to-day basis to do the required scrutiny and assurance. So encourage all of your colleagues to treat a request for attendance at a board subcommittee as a request from the board, and therefore treat it with the import that we hope everybody would do should they be invited to present to us here. And understand how much work there is. Again, we do everything we can to avoid duplication and to enable people to use their work in whichever forum we are looking at it, rather than writing reports for multiple different committees and duplicating work. So very much wanting people to use their time wisely. Thank you. Okay, let's move on, and some exciting things in terms of our commitment to sustainable development management plan. Alan, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. So we agreed the Sustainable Development Management Plan back in 2020, and of course got diverted very quickly with the COVID pandemic. But one of the things I wanted to do was bring back a report. It's taken some time, but bring something back that shows progress. I'll take the report as read. You'll see that the SDMP is a 5-year plan and therefore goes out of date next year. And we're currently embarking on a piece of work to refresh that, ready for next year. So it's worth at this point just taking stock of what we've delivered. And I'll, as I say, take it as read, but broadly 2/3 of the proposals that we put in our plan we've already delivered, and about 1/3 of them we're in progress actually delivering. There are a number of highlights in there which I won't go through in detail around. We all know about the work we're doing around our integrated energy service on the county hospital site. We've introduced sustainability impact assessments on some of our major schemes. We've been doing work around active travel and public transport. Climate change adaptation plan was something that came to the board earlier in the year. We've been delivering large-scale capital schemes on the around our sites to the BREEAM Excellent standard, which is a good thing. We've introduced more sustainable care, a lot of which we've heard about earlier. Delivered all the measures around what we're doing around our workforce, and brought sustainability considerations more into procurement. What I really wanted to bring to the board's attention now, and I think is quite interesting, are the appendices, which I think are just worth mentioning briefly. We talked about this at a previous group board meeting, and actually finding metrics that demonstrate the improvements in sustainability are quite hard to find, and there really isn't anything at a national level or any methodology around it. So we've come up with some proxy measures ourselves, many of these around the state's functions, but I just think they're quite interesting. So when you consider how much we've grown, particularly the county hospital site, which these refer to, in terms of the space and the new buildings that have come on board, you can see that from an energy perspective, we're using actually a bit less energy per square metre than we were a few years ago. So there's some really encouraging news here. Water consumption has stayed fairly flat, and actually waste is a good news story with overall waste levels being down, but is doing more recycling and none of that going to landfill as well. So again, that's good news. And then finally, mileage, which is down, and let's face it, was down largely due to the COVID pandemic, but it hasn't gone back up to where it was, and that's despite us doing a lot more in the community, which many of us are aware of. So I hope that's helpful, but it really is there just to give people an update on that actually that we've delivered an awful lot in terms of our sustainability plan, or our greener plan, whatever you want to call it, and we're starting to look at ambitious plans for the future.
Very helpful, Alan. Thank you very much. Questions and comments for Alan? Really good work. Look forward. Oh, Grace, apologies.
No, just a comment to say really appreciating the work and really appreciating everything that's been done and how much we are, for a small trust leading in this. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to the refresh next year. I love the metrics.
at some point it'd be interesting to see how we benchmark across the group if we haven't already got that. I know we assume that we're trailblazing and therefore prioritising this, but I'm sure the rest of our colleagues in the group would be keen to join in too. So, but yeah, anything that does the ultimate in prevention, which is to look after our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren and future generations by looking after the environment in which we live, is to be applauded. So grateful to you and the team for that. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. The perinatal safety report. Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair alluded to previously, we do lots of the detail of many of our quality safety reports at Quality Committee each month, and this report certainly gets due scrutiny there. So there are just sort of 4 very brief things I'd like to touch on, if I may, Chair. The first is just in relation to neonatal staffing. It's been on our risk register for some time, and that's around individual nurses qualified within the neonatal with the neonatal specific qualification. As you can see, the percentages are quite low, but we do achieve 100% of the time a neonatally qualified nurse on each shift. We have got 2 staff undertaking their training this year and another 2 planned for next year. So we keep a close eye on that, and certainly our external regulators are aware of the fragility of that staffing position. We do have the neonatal critical care peer review scheduled for early November. It's a little bit like the adult one that we've had recently, and so that's scheduled for the first week in November. Secondly, I just wanted to touch on the bit that's captured in the safety walkabouts, which is we are nationally required to undertake what's called a fresh eyes audit. So this is around maintaining maternal safety during the labour phase. Although it's a national requirement, there isn't a national audit tool, and therefore the way that we audit that is very inconsistent. So during our safety walkabout, we suggested that colleagues certainly in the first instance worked with the local maternity neonatal safety system to develop a standardised audit tool across our system, so that when we're comparing our audit results, we're comparing like for like. We'll then extend that out to our foundation group, and then if they haven't caught up nationally, we'll make some recommendations nationally. The third thing I just wanted to touch on, which I think is important for the board to note, was that Quality Committee received an update on a change in plan around our obstetric theatre. So we have 1 obstetric theatre that undertakes emergency and elective caesarean sections. We did originally have a plan to move the elective sections list down to our main theatre suite, which would leave our obstetric theatre available for emergencies only. Due to very good reasons, particularly around workforce, we changed that plan. So Quality Committee received the risk assessment and the appropriate mitigations for that last week, and that was supported in terms of our plan moving forward. There is a plan for a second obstetric theatre, but that needs to be worked up, developed and costed and prioritised before that would get off the starting blocks. And finally, from me, just in relation to the board dates for next year, we're working towards our compliance with the 10 standards for clinical negligence schemes for trusts, and we will be requiring later on this year for board to delegate responsibility for sign-off of those to Quality Committee, given there isn't a board meeting in January. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Very comprehensive. Thank you, Lucy. Any questions for Lucy? No, as you say, well scrutinised at Quality Committee. Are you asking for the delegation to be noted now, Lucy, while we're discussing it, or will you do that in December?
We'll do that in December, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, fine. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Lucy. Let's move on. Board assurance framework and high risks, Erica.
Yeah, so the board assurance framework is the risks to the trust achieving our strategic objectives. We have introduced this time, as well as the direction of travel, and identified where there are new BAF risks, where those risks appear on the standard 5x5 matrix, just to give the board and the members of the public where those a feel for where those risks sit. Also included are the high risks from the trust. These are more the more operational dynamic risks subject to change. They're reviewed. We review those monthly at the Executive Risk Management meeting, which is chaired by Jane. So they are reported to board quarterly, but will be subject to sort of a lot of change in between those intervening periods.
Thank you, Erica. Questions or comments to Erica or Jane on the BAF? Sharon.
Thanks, Erica. I really like the add of the direction of travel. I think it's really helpful. Just one thing that's sort of even better if we could see how long it had been static at those levels, because some of them are quite wide adrift, aren't they, of our target risk rating of where we are. So if we could get an idea of how long they've been there and whether there are any particular blockers that are stopping us moving forward, I think that would enhance everybody's understanding and help with our assurance. Thanks.
Very helpful suggestion. Thank you, Sharon. Any other questions or comments? No, then duly noted. Thank you. Right, the final section is to receive committee summary reports and minutes. So we'll start with the Audit Committee report and minutes from the 13th and 25th of June. Nicola, anything that you would like to pull out for the board's consideration?
Nothing that's not in the summary, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Nicola? No, thank you. And the Charity Trustee report and minutes from the 13th of June. Grace, anything you'd like to pull out?
There's nothing I wanted to raise at board. We've got the summary there in minutes, but of course happy to take any questions.
And as before, any questions or comments for Grace? No. And the Quality Committee report and minutes from the 25th of July, Ian.
Yeah, thank you. As has been said a number of times in the meeting, we do have comprehensive discussions at Quality Committee about a range of issues, and the minutes are there. There are half a dozen things or so that I've pulled out particularly of note, but nothing to escalate to committee. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Ian? No. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to any other business. Does anybody have any items of additional business that they would like to bring for discussion? No, so a couple from me. One is to thank executive colleagues and all of our staff for the very humbling and impressive description of our services and the work that happened that was articulated through the annual general meeting last Thursday evening. Inevitably, as a board, we often concentrate on the things that are off track, the things that are worrying about us, the things that aren't going as well as they need to be. And it was a joy to be able to be celebrating the phenomenal work that happens day in, day out from all of our staff in every corner of the trust, and the work that they do with partners to provide the care that we all want for our families, friends, neighbours and our communities. So thank you all very much for that. We sometimes are asked why we're continuing to hold these meetings electronically and haven't reverted to all meetings being held face to face. I think that the annual general meeting is a very good example of kind of why not. Historically, and some of us have been around the health service for a number of decades, the number of people we would get who were able to join us in person at a public meeting was always very small. More at an AGM than at regular board meetings, but Erica kindly ran the numbers for me, and 245 people had viewed the AGM, with a significant number having downloaded the videos and able to watch it again. So I think that it enables us to be much more visible and accountable to the public, and that is one of the joys of this sort of technology, particularly for people where access can be difficult. I think this makes us more inclusive. So applaud some of our colleagues with the technical know-how and whiz, and I'm still going up. So it's not too late. It's available on YouTube. The link will be on our website if anybody wants to watch the AGM and that summary. And we'll look forward to a similar array of talents and wonderful work that everybody does next year. The other thing that we need to do today is to mark the celebration and the contribution that Erica has made over the last few years, that she has been our company secretary, and as she goes on to the next chapter in life's adventure. I'm not sure whether retirement's a good word. I think it's just the next thing. Those of us who try to retire, it doesn't always pan out as you want, but the great thing is to embrace the opportunity. And one thing that we all know about Erica is that she's always up for an opportunity. So Jane kindly gave me some of the stuff that not everybody knows, so I will fill in some of the gaps for you. So Erica has been with the Trust for 6 years, joining the team in July 2018 on a 6-month secondment. Secondments are never quite as short as you might think. So 6 months turns into 6 years, which is about par for the course. Secondment from the Herefordshire Council, so grateful to our colleagues in the council for sharing you. Erica had worked for the local authority for 9 years, a number of teams, head of law, governance, including emergency planning, health and safety, elections, governance, procurement and legal. And one thing that Erica did say is that when in doubt, add some more things to her job description, which is an opportunity that Jane has embraced at every opportunity, giving Erica a variety of new roles as her time with us has shown. However, before that, Erica served for 20 years in the RAF in strategic planning, policy and logistics appointment, latterly as a wing commander at the lead headquarters responsible for operational planning of all RAF resources and staff committed to operations worldwide. So unsurprisingly, we grabbed her expertise with both hands, especially when the COVID pandemic hit, and Erica suddenly was in charge of magically whisking up a variety of responses, particularly around the vaccination programme, which she did with her usual determination, flair and exceptional competence. When she started at work, proud history of coaching rowing at Ross Rowing Club and spending time with her family in a camper van. Sometimes that leads to a really awful accident where she pushes the boat out by walking down a path and breaking her ankle, but that'll teach you to be adventurous, Erica. So we hope that the next chapter fills you with as much joy and excitement as we hope that you've experienced as being part of our family, and we wish you all the very best for the future.
Thank you, Frances. Am I allowed to respond, please?
You are, of course you are.
Because I've been both a Wye Valley Trust patient and a member of staff, and since the get-go, I've been amazed at the complexity of running a hospital and the sheer number of moving parts. So I've had huge admiration for the staff and volunteers across the whole trust, and in particular the leadership I've experienced from the board. But in particular, I'd like to thank the executive team because their work is relentless, and they're always focused. And I want to thank them in particular for their support and friendship over the last 6 years. Thank you.
Very well said, Erica. Thank you. And we're delighted that you're not really going away. You know, Hotel California you can check out, but you can't really leave. So, and our job will continue to be to look after you, your families and friends, and the people of the Ross community that we know means so much to you. But we'll say goodbye properly in a few days' time. But we are very grateful for all your hard work and commitment, particularly in your 3rd or 4th or however many other chapters of career that you have shown. So thank you very much. We haven't had any questions from members of the public, but as usual, if there are questions that you would like to put to the board, we were always keen to receive feedback, and you can do that through the websites. We'll give you the details of how to do that, so hope that people will feel able to do so if that is pertinent to them. And the next meeting of the board as a unitary board, it will be on the 5th of December for colleagues and members of the public who haven't previously been to our board. We meet with our foundation group colleagues on a quarterly basis. So our November meeting will be the 4 boards meeting together and Wye Valley board by ourselves in December at 1 o'clock, available on Teams as we have now, and again how to join that will be available on the website if anybody would like to join us. So thank you all very much indeed. For board colleagues, can I suggest we take a 5-minute break and meet back again at 25 past when we will go into the private board to discuss issues that require a degree of confidentiality. Thank you all very much.